and welcome to On to the Next Project. I don't remember how we start these things at all. It's a new year. It's 2021. Hey, Adam, how are you?
Good. We're just gonna jump right into it. But I know it's a new year. A lot of crazy stuff has happened, and maybe we'll even dabble on that a little bit. However, I want to start off with what we talked about at the end of our last episode, because we were kind of talking about social media in a way that we never have before. And actually, I was surprised by your perspective, because you were talking about how a lot of people probably don't need social media. And you said that even you, for your business, technically you wouldn't need to for your talking events. And I kind of didn't agree. And I know we do different things, but I thought it would be a really interesting topic for right now.
Yeah, well, I think social media is a very easy place to feel productive and not actually be productive. And so I think there's a real trap, and I do it all the time. I have all my socials. I'm on, well, I used to say I'm on everywhere. I'm clearly not, because I'm not on TikTok and I'm not on all kinds of other things, but I'm on a lot of places. And I'd say 10% or less of the time I feel like I'm doing something that's worthwhile on there. And most of the time I'm feeling busy, which feels productive, but it's not. I'm making myself busy, which feels productive, but it's not. And it distracts you from doing the real work. Sometimes it feels like, oh, I'm going to see what people are up to on Instagram, or I'm going to make a new post there. I'm going to make a post on LinkedIn, and that'll be good for my thought leadership or my whatever. And in reality, I should have been working on my book. I should have been working on sending an email to one of my VIP clients, touching base with them, because that's the stuff. A single email to a VIP client might result in a booking where I get to go do the work. Whereas posting on social, posting on LinkedIn, yeah, if I stopped all of it forever, it might have an impact on my business. But that post I didn't need to do, whatever it was, almost every time. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah. Like I don't fully agree. However, parts of that really resonate with me, especially when you talk about the writing, which is something that I do. I'm working on some kids, some picture books, and even writing some shows and stuff. And I will say, social media doesn't get in the way of my puppet building. However, it does get in the. I mean, there's certain things that they're just hard to do. Like I can film the process of me doing a building a puppet. It's very visual, but like I wouldn't film the process of me writing, you know? And not only that, there's a big part of I don't mean like actual writer's block, but when you're trying to work through something, there it feels like sometimes when you're not actually writing, you're not being productive, although you are. So you think like, oh, I could just be, trying to lift my platform more by posting something on social media. So it's easy to get pulled away from it. And that's not, and I will say, actually, that's where I will agree with you is it is, I've used it as a way to keep myself accountable to create my physical art. However, it has kind of gotten in the way of the more clerical and creative writing part of my world.
I think the creative part is really, really the problem. I think where the big downside to social for me is that creativity requires downtime. It requires time where you're just alone with your thoughts. It requires being bored sometimes. And social media eliminates ever being bored, right? And so when you're just never bored, you just have this constant stream of new stuff coming in, which makes it easy to go, oh, maybe I'll do this, or maybe I do that, or I should be posting this, or that person's doing better than me, or this or that. And if you just sat bored for a little while, you might have the next idea, you might have the next thing that comes along, you might spark an interest, and that's where real creative work comes from. I feel like there's something to be said for that kind of cliche of like a writer or a philosopher, an artist that's just kind of staring into the clouds. They look aloof from the outside. Anybody else thinks that they're just being an idiot, but just staring off into the abyss and letting your mind do whatever it wants is where a lot of great creative ideas come from that turn into business ideas and actually make a difference in the world. So, yeah, yeah.
Something on the podcast, on the Puppeteers podcast, my podcast, we recently had a puppeteer named Michael Curry on, and he's prolific in the puppetry world. You're familiar with his work, though you might not know his name. He worked on with Julie Taymor and designed a lot, like most of the Lion King stuff was his from Broadway,
Wow.
Frozen, on Broadway, a lot of like I think theme park stuff as well. absolutely prolific. And he actually did a TED talk a couple years ago. And what he talked about was what he called the golden minute. He said so often now, especially in creative endeavors, people are quick to want to look something up. Let's he'd even say like, oh, let's say he has to design a tiger, right? And a lot of people immediately Google a bunch of tigers, right? And try to get, and that's an important thing and part of that process. But he says, give yourself a minute, just 1 minute. You owe it to yourself. Give yourself a minute to completely do something from scratch in your head. And then use the rest of that reference stuff and Googling stuff, which is important and helpful, to kind of mold that so that you at least start with something that is yours.
That's really good advice, and it makes me think of one of my friends, colleagues, who's a writing coach and an editor, a freelance editor and a writing coach. And one of the when I first started telling her about the book on luck over a year ago, when I started talking about the second book, which of course is now on the shelf while I'm doing something else. But when I started doing that, I said, you know, I gotta go find out. I gotta go find out all the books that's ever been written about luck and read them all. And she said, no, don't do that first. She said, first write everything you can possibly write about luck, just based on how you're already thinking. All the thoughts you already have, write all of it. And when you've got nothing left to write on your own, then start to read what everybody else has written about luck. She said, because you really need to get your thoughts on paper first and how you're thinking of about it and your perspective and the things that have happened to you and people you know before you invite in all that other stuff. And then, then you do need to read what everybody else wrote and what the psychology says and what the research is.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's similar to the idea of just a minute before you hit Google. What was the name of that guy? Oh, here it is. I know it now.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's an amazing tool, but yeah, you don't even, he said a lot of people don't even give themselves the chance. And what you're talking about reminds me of, coincidentally, I'm in the middle of, no, I just finished Seth Godin's new book, The Practice.
Did you like it?
Yeah, I liked it a lot. Again, it's hard. Yeah. He reads them all and they're such similar topics. It's hard to differentiate where the ideas come from. But as long as I got all Seth's ideas in my head, it works. I don't need to know where it came from, which book rather. Although what I'm going to say is going to contradict that, what he said. What he talked about, again, I'm going to butcher it a little bit, but he talked about that's part of the work. That's part of the practice, is knowing all the other things that are out there to make sure yours is different. But my guess is he'd agree with what we are, just the conclusion we're coming to, though, is you got to give yourself a chance and do it yourself, and then do that work to make sure. Then you can edit. That's editing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm so glad you read The Practice because I thought it was Seth's best book since Lynchpin, one of the best he's written. It's for creatives, anybody interested in this. If you do anything creative of any kind, however you define creativity, it's basically you've talked about The War of Art here on the podcast, and Stephen Pressfield, and sitting right there.
My buddy just I did the audiobook because I listened to it while I'm building puppets, and my buddy, I told him about the book, and I think he forgot that I told him about the book, and he's like, he mailed me the book. He's like, you gotta check out this book. I'm like, I told you about it. I told you to buy it. It was hysterical.
That's a great compliment, though. He forgot, and then he thought of you, and he sent it to you.
And actually, I'm white lying too. I didn't actually say that. I was just like, thank you. I just said thank you. Thank you for the book.
Well, I don't think he's one of the 9 people still watching this podcast. So
yeah.
So anyway, I thought The Practice is really it's going to be one of my recommended books for a while, especially, part of it actually is related to what we're talking about with social media, and it's that if you really want to develop a practice of doing creative work, if you want to get that it's not that you are creative, therefore you do creative work. It's you do creative work, therefore you are creative. And I think you have to do first and then take in later, right?
Would you say that is the through message of that entire book?
I think so.
Yeah, I think that's the best. That's the thing that, again, that one line was like, I'm like, yep, that's it. And that's the hardest thing that's something that I just know and have done. But just hearing it said in one sentence is just so refreshing. It's like, it's like feel a little vindicated. Like I've had hours of conversations with some of my friends trying to say that
Yeah.
he said in one sentence, which
Yeah.
is the magic of Seth.
Right. If only we could all
Yeah.
be that clear on what we
The
want to say.
brevity.
Yeah, no,
Yes.
yeah, no, I think that's exactly the point. Kind of like that. How do you get into the flow? It's like you get into the flow, you just start doing it, and then you get into the flow because you're doing it. You don't find the flow and then do it.
Yeah.
It's that thing. But yeah, so I do see social media by and large as a distraction. It can be a wonderful tool. I mean, obviously, its original intention to connect people doesn't seem to be there anymore. Is kind of what happened. Is I feel like 4 or 5 years ago, if we were having this conversation, I would have 100% agreed with you and said social media is an invaluable tool for my business. And now it feels a lot more like everybody broadcasting at each other, and a lot less like it's not built. It doesn't foster connection and audience building the way it used to. I think you have to, like, you've built a massive audience, an incredibly engaged audience, but on YouTube and other places. But I feel like you've had to fight against some of what social media has become in order to build that. I don't think it's built to do that anymore.
Yeah, I think so. Well, you know what it is? Well, first of all, I think one thing we might want to clarify too is there's a difference between being a consumer of it and being a creator of it. I think between those, I think there's still problems with what we're talking about on both sides. But I think the bigger problem is being a consumer and maybe the wrong type of creator. Because I think a lot of companies, it's starting to get very corporate, the social media output, and even individual art YouTubers are almost getting too polished, which kind of takes away the charm of social media. I see, like, even I'm trying to work with these local theaters. I'm like, the stuff that you're posting looks like something that should be on your website. And the whole point of social media is to make a connection with someone, to not have that kind of corporate. Like, I think we have to get back to social media being more personal. And to go back to, so I know we've talked about Gary Vee before, and I'm not still following his stuff as much as I used to, because that's kind of what his whole point is. He's like, yeah, but anyway, is just more of documentation of what you're doing rather than treating it like ads is the way even if you're not literally placing ads, a
Yeah.
lot of people's posts look like ads.
So here, I'm going to ask you a question then, and we can turn the second half of this or the last 10 minutes of this into a little bit more of what this show, where we kind of originally wanted this show to be about a year ago. It's creeping up on a year because it was right before the pandemic. We were like, we're going to start a podcast
Was it
together.
before the pandemic?
Yeah, it was. It was like,
Wow.
because I was literally in the middle of the country. We were talking. I was in a rental car for hours in the middle of the country on the way to a gig.
That's
Having
right.
flown all day when you and I were talking about this. Okay. I started an experiment about a year ago with my Instagram, just on my Instagram, and I decided to turn it into what looks like what people expect to see from a thought leader, and I decided it's going to be this perfect grid, or every other day or every other post is a quote graphic, and every other post is basically an image that links to my blog, kind of a thing, and I think the consistency of doing that has been good, but it's not bringing in I think it's been good for my existing audience. It's not bringing in more people, and it feels I feel really stifled by it a lot, where I go, oh, I want to put this on Instagram, and I go, no, I can't. It's not a quote graphic or a blog post, and those are the only two things I do, and if I do that, then I screw up my grid. And my question is, if you look at my Instagram, does that feel like me anymore, or does it just feel like any generic thought leader's Instagram? Like should I just go back to posting? I did it to try to make myself more consistent, and it did make me consistent because it made it easy. Two posts a week, one's a quote, one's a blog. So I'm more consistent, but I feel like I'm less authentic. I'm less connected with the people on the other side.
To compare it to art, I'd say, again, I don't mean it's a negative in a mean way, but like it's the difference between like a paint by numbers painting and like something just out of the mind of an artist, right? Paint by numbers done well. I mean, it looks very nice, but you're just following directions, following a formula, right? Following a recipe. rather than it just being an organic, authentic representation of thoughts coming out of your head. Not that those aren't thoughts coming out of your head, but just so curated that it comes off as inauthentic, which is part of your whole business model, I think, is your authenticity.
Yeah, and it's still me writing all of it. I played around
Yeah.
with having and I may go back to having a social media manager. I'm working with a business coach again, a different business coach right now, who's hopefully going to help me do what I've never been able to do, which is build a virtual team around me to take all the stuff that doesn't need to me completely off my hands so I can scale my business this year. That'll be a thing we can talk about as the year goes on here, because I want more time for my family, for my son, who's 4 months old, and I feel like I'm barely scratching the surface of my business because I'm so bogged down in every aspect of it. So I may be getting a social media manager again, but again, to do just the graphic design and the scheduling and stuff, not to actually write anything. So I'm still writing all of it. When I look at it, when I visually look at my Instagram account, it doesn't look like me. It looks like it could be anybody. If you
Yeah.
read the captions, it's clearly me. But there's something wrong, and I feel like it was a good experiment for a year, but I need a different approach this year, and I'm not sure what
Yeah,
it is.
and you know you best, and I'd maybe not try to get one of those people for at least for social media. Maybe your other things for your business, but again, that's even having it scheduled and graphic designed is a little bit of kind of what I'm talking about. It just makes it seem like it's post coming out at 4:53 because you had that thought or took that picture at that moment is why. So someone wants to follow you to see what's coming out of your head, to see kind of a peek inside. It kind of reminds me, one of my friends told me, they said, "Oh, Adam, you should get on Cameo." You should get on Cameo and do puppet videos for people. I'm like, okay, first, no, first for many reasons, but the main reason is, you know, aside from the fact that I don't, nobody needs to talk to me for stuff like that. But so this person was looking at me as in I was like famous in some way, which is so far from the truth anyway. But like, I see that app is for people who are like famous for things outside of social media, like someone like Jim Carrey or something like that. It's a way to connect with someone that you weren't able to connect with. So someone on social media being on Cameo makes no sense to me because the only reason they even know about you is because of the connection on social media. So like
Right.
it's such a clash. It makes no sense to me. I know there's social media people on there. I'm sure some of the huge ones who've kind of broken through do well on it, but it just seemed like the antithesis of everything that I am trying to do and stand for.
Yeah, that's interesting because I've had one cameo done for me.
Mm.
Casey, Casey and Ben, some of my best friends here in Connecticut. Casey and
That's
Ben
right.
for
It
my
was Penn
Yeah, that's
Jillette,
right. I
right?
think I
Yeah.
told you that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's right.
Forgot about
They
that.
did Penn, and for 1 minute, Penn talked right to me. Knew exactly, that we were pregnant and that we were in the middle of the pandemic. And that I was a magician and all this stuff. And it was that I never would have had a personal interaction with Penn. Even if he's accessible via Twitter, you were never going to have that kind of a personal interaction with Penn. So that was really cool. That makes sense. But yeah, no, if it was like even like Casey Neistat, like I would hope he's not on Cameo because even though he could be because he's like properly famous at some level,
Yeah.
I feel like everybody who wants to have a personal interaction with him kind of can on
Yeah.
social media, or at least that's how it feels. So that makes sense. But let's wrap. Let's come back to kind of the original point of this as we wrap up. I mean, so clearly there's a distinction between using social media as a creator versus as a consumer. I think as a consumer, it has almost no value in my life. If I were just a consumer, I think I'd probably delete everything and scale my Facebook down to the 20 people or 30 people I actually talk to and care about on a normal basis. And I'd probably delete everything else.
Mhm.
Um, as a business owner, I hate the term necessary evil. I feel like it's thrown around a lot. I don't know if it's a necessary evil, but it feels like a necessary distraction, and I don't like it. I don't like it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like well, I think the pandemic has brought it to light more than anything because in a world where you can't physically interact with people, it's kind of become the virtual world. It is the world too. And I remember some people, like I think it was Gary Vee, maybe it was maybe Gary Vee, someone saying like, if you're not on here, you don't exist to a certain extent. And during pandemic time, that's definitely true. If you're an
Yeah.
entertainer and you didn't do social media, like you didn't exist.
Well, see, I I don't know. I mean,
Unless you
I'm
already had, a client base to
right.
pull
Well,
from
that's
that
I
was
was just gonna
also
say.
wanting something virtual.
Right. I mean, that's what I was gonna say is like 90% of my business over the last, since the pandemic started came from people who already knew about me. It wasn't because they saw me on Instagram. They didn't. They're most of them aren't even. Almost none of them are even connected with me on social networks. They're not
Yeah.
following my posts. They're not watching my YouTube channel.
Hmm.
I've been in the industry. I've been working. I have personal relationships with the clients directly, and I have their emails. And
Yeah.
email is email. It's a straight. You get right into their inbox. And yeah, so maybe I'm in an unusual situation. If you were if you were early in your business career and you hadn't built up enough, then you need some way to be visible, and you can't do that in the real world. Then yeah, it would have been absolutely necessary during the pandemic for sure, and still is obviously. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I'm so tired of getting my attention pulled, and I know it's happening when it's happening. That's the most frustrating thing. Is I'm
Yeah.
scrolling, going, I know I should be working. I know I shouldn't be
Yeah.
doing this. I know this is a waste of time, and I can't get out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I feel you, and sometimes I fall into that trap. Once in a while, I let it happen and let it take over. If I'm enjoying it, if I hit a good streak, but yeah, I guess since we're wrapping up now, a final thing I would just leave with people, and maybe as a New Year's resolution, if you want to call it that, or a goal, is to just try to make your posting more intentional and authentic and and don't it's hard. I always say, I put pressure on myself to release stuff, but I forgive myself when I don't. And I think that's important too, is to not be too hard on yourself, but give yourself some amount of accountability to actually do it
I like
authentically.
in I like intentional. Intentional has been like my word of the year by accident. I've used the word intentional in all of the workshops I've already run in this still very young year. It's become a theme of my workshops and my speaking, and some of my writing is people have talked about ever since COVID started that we can't really connect anymore. Human connection isn't here anymore, and it's clearly not true. It's just that we don't have the incidental connections. We don't randomly bump into people in
Mm,
Starbucks and waiting in lobbies anymore. And
yeah,
so we have to be more intentional about connecting with people. We have to make an effort to do it because online you have to send a message, you have to make a comment, you have to do things like this. And so I've been leaning into that. So I like that you used intentional. I definitely need to be more intentional. I feel like it's funny. I think I'm being intentional with the way I rebuilt my social a year ago, at least Instagram, by saying, "Oh, this is a schedule. I always do it," and whatever. But that actually is the opposite of intentional. That
yeah.
I removed all the intentionality from it and just said this is a system now.
Yeah, you're treating. I feel like you're almost treating it like a portfolio rather
Yeah.
than just like a. I feel like social media should be a peek inside someone's brain, kind of, right,
Yeah.
of who they are, rather than who you want to show people you are. Which again, without a doubt, it's going to be a little bit of both, but
Yeah.
making sure that that peek inside is there too, and that's just the, yeah. I think
See, I
that's
like
important.
leveraging Instagram for my weekly blog posts. I feel like I actually do get people from Instagram who click over,
Yeah,
go to the link in the bio, or even if they don't, I put the excerpt. I put the 2 paragraphs or 3 paragraphs there in the caption, and people read it and they comment, or I get a
yeah,
message from somebody, or somebody emails me about it, and those come from Instagram. And maybe that's a different audience that maybe they're not subscribed to my weekly blog and
yeah,
never would be, and they see it because I put it on Instagram. So I want to make sure the weekly blog stays on Instagram in that shorter form.
yeah.
But maybe the quotes and stuff. Maybe I just need to get back to, other than the weekly blog, which is every Wednesday,
Mhm.
just posting when it makes sense, behind the scenes stuff. Here's what I'm working on. Here's some thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I would do. It's exactly what I would do. Yeah, yeah, I don't think for a second you should stop posting your blog stuff there, but I think we got to get a little bit more of a peek into you as well. Um, I gotta
A
just
little
start
peak.
posting a little bit more. I've just been really leaving it off the, since I don't stop posting in November and this in December and January, but I definitely slow down after
Yeah,
the second week of December and in the first week of January, and I pick up in February big time. So,
nice.
but
Well,
anyway,
I think both of us got to run. I think you got a thing at 5, right? You're
yeah,
two
I gotta
minutes.
go.
You 2 minutes late. You got to go.
2 minutes late, gotta go. All right,
On to
on to
the
the
next
next
project.
project. Literally.